The sun was setting over the Chattahoochee River in northern Georgia, casting orange light across the water, and 16-year-old Maya Chen was standing on the rocky bank with her youth group, laughing about something her friend had said. It was the last day of summer camp, August 2021, and they'd spent the afternoon swimming and playing volleyball, and now everyone was gathering their things to head back to the cabins. Maya was a strong swimmer, had been on her high school swim team for 2 years, and she felt completely comfortable around water, had never had a moment of real fear in a river or pool. She wasn't particularly religious. Even though she'd been coming to this Christian camp since she was 12, it was more about the friends and the fun than the faith. And when they had worship services, she'd sing along, but never really felt connected to what they were singing about. God was an idea, a concept, something adults talked about, but not something that felt real or relevant to her teenage life. She was bending down to grab her towel when she felt it, a hand on her shoulder, and she turned, expecting to see one of her friends, but there was nobody there, and in that split second of confusion, her foot slipped on the wet rocks and she went into the water backwards. It happened so fast, she didn't have time to catch herself, didn't have time to yell, just hit the cold water and went under. She came up gasping, tried to find her footing, but the current was stronger than she'd realized, much stronger, and it pulled her away from the bank before she could grab anything. She heard people yelling her name from the shore, heard someone scream for a counselor, and she tried to swim back, but the river had her, was dragging her downstream toward where the current got faster, where the water narrowed and rushed over rocks. By the way, before I keep going, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening to this story from. Maya fought the current, kicked hard, tried to angle herself toward the bank, but she was moving too fast. The water was too strong, and every time she got close to shore, the river pulled her back toward the center. She could see the rapids ahead, could see the white water where the river dropped over a small waterfall, and she knew if she went over that, she was in serious trouble. She'd heard the counselors warn them about that spot, said even experienced kayakers avoided it because the rocks at the bottom were sharp and the undertow was dangerous. She screamed, "Help! Somebody help me!" But her friends on the bank were already so far behind her, getting smaller as the current carried her faster, and she realized with cold terror that nobody could reach her in time, nobody could save her. She was going over those rapids and there was nothing anyone could do. She tried one more time to swim to the side, put everything she had into it, but her arms were getting tired, her legs were cramping from fighting the current, and the roar of the rapids was getting louder, closer, maybe 20 yards away now. Maya thought about her parents, about how they'd get a call that their daughter had drowned at church camp, about how her little brother would react, about all the things she'd never get to do, and she started crying, tears mixing with river water on her face. And in that moment of complete helplessness, she did something she'd never really done before. She prayed, not a memorized prayer from camp, but a desperate cry from somewhere deep inside. God, if you're real, if you're really there, I need you right now. Please don't let me die. Please save me. I don't want to die. Please, God, please. And then she felt it. Pressure on her back, right between her shoulder blades, like someone had placed both hands there and was pushing hard, and she was moving, not with the current, but against it, being shoved toward the bank with force that didn't make sense, that couldn't be the current because the current was pulling the other direction. Maya stopped fighting and let whatever was pushing her do its work, and she moved across the river like she was being carried by invisible arms, moved 10 feet, 15 feet, and then her hands hit rocks near the shore, and she grabbed them and pulled herself up onto the bank, just as the main current would have swept her over the rapids. She crawled onto dry land, collapsed on her stomach, and vomited river water, coughed and gasped and shook uncontrollably. The camp counselors reached her about 2 minutes later, out of breath from running downstream along the bank, and they wrapped her in towels and checked her over. Couldn't believe she'd made it to shore. One counselor, a woman named Jessica, who'd been a lifeguard for 10 years, kept saying, "I don't understand. I saw you in the middle of the current heading for the rapids. There's no way you could have swum against that. The current there is too strong. How did you get to the bank?" Maya looked at her, still shaking, still trying to process what had happened, and said, "I didn't swim. Something pushed me. I felt hands on my back pushing me to shore, but there was nobody there. It was like God pushed me." Jessica stared at her for a long moment, then looked out at the river, at the current still rushing past, at the rapids where Maya should have gone over, and she said quietly, "I believe you, because there's no other explanation. You were too far out, moving too fast, and you got to shore going the wrong direction against physics, against everything I know about river currents." She helped Maya stand up, walked her back toward the main camp, and as they walked, Jessica said, "God saved you today, Maya. He literally saved your life, and I think you need to figure out what you're going to do with that." Maya spent that night in the camp infirmary, not because she was seriously hurt, but because they wanted to monitor her for shock and secondary drowning. She couldn't sleep, kept replaying those moments in the river, kept feeling those hands on her back, and she knew with absolute certainty that what happened wasn't natural, wasn't explainable, was something beyond the physical world. Around midnight she got up and found the camp director, a man named Pastor Mike, who she'd known for years but never really talked to about anything serious. She knocked on his office door, and when he opened it, looking concerned, she said, "Can we talk? I need to understand what happened to me today." They sat in his office and Maya told him everything, about being pulled into the current, about trying to fight it and failing, about the prayer she'd said in desperation, about the hands that pushed her to safety. Pastor Mike listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he said, "Maya, I've been in ministry for 30 years. I've heard a lot of testimonies, but what you're describing is one of the clearest examples of divine intervention I've ever encountered. God heard your prayer and he responded physically, tangibly, undeniably." Maya wiped her eyes. "But why? I'm not even a real Christian. I come to camp, but I don't really believe most of it. I don't pray. I don't read my Bible. Why would God save me?" Pastor Mike smiled gently. "Because that's who he is, Maya. He doesn't save people because they've earned it or because they're already following him. He saves them because he loves them and because he has a plan for them. You called out to him in your moment of greatest need, and he answered, and now you have a choice to make about what you do with that." Maya asked, "What choice?" "The choice of whether you're going to keep treating God as an idea or whether you're going to start following him as a person, as the God who just saved your life and clearly wants a relationship with you." Maya went home from camp the next day, and her parents picked her up and hugged her for a long time when they heard what happened. Her mum cried, and her dad kept saying, "We could have lost you. We almost lost you." And Maya told them, "But you didn't. Because God saved me. God pushed me out of the current, and I don't know why, but he did." Her parents looked at each other, and her dad, who'd never been particularly religious, said, "Then maybe we need to start going to church. Maybe we need to figure out who this God is who saved our daughter." So they started going to church as a family, found a church near their home in Atlanta, and Maya started attending the youth group there. She told her story to the youth pastor, a woman named Sarah, and Sarah asked if she'd be willing to share it with the whole youth group. Maya was nervous but said yes, and the next Wednesday night she stood in front of 60 teenagers and told them about the river, about the current, about the prayer, about the hands that pushed her to safety. When she finished, half the room was crying, and 3 kids came up to her afterwards and said they wanted to become Christians, wanted to know the God who would save someone like that. The story spread through the church, and Maya was asked to share it during a Sunday service, and then at other churches, and then at a regional youth conference where over 1,000 teenagers heard her testimony. Every time she told it, she emphasized the same points. She wasn't a strong Christian when it happened. She'd never really believed before that moment. But God saved her anyway, and that proved to her that God was real and personal and active in the world. News outlets picked up the story. Teen claims divine intervention saved her from river rapids. And while some people were skeptical, the camp counselors who'd witnessed it backed up her account, said there was no natural explanation for how she got from the middle of the current to the shore. A hydrologist from Georgia Tech analyzed the river conditions that day, looked at flow rates and current speeds, and concluded in a published paper, based on the documented current velocity and the witness accounts of the subject's position in the river, conventional swimming against the current to reach the bank would have been physically impossible. The force required to move a human body laterally across that current exceeds what human musculature can generate. If the account is accurate, an external force was applied. When asked what that external force might be, he said carefully, "I'm a scientist, not a theologian, but I can tell you it wasn't the water." Maya's life changed completely after that summer. She went from being a casual church attendee to being deeply committed to her faith, started reading her Bible every day, started praying not just when she was in trouble, but as a regular conversation with God. She felt called to youth ministry, started volunteering to help with middle school students, telling them her story and helping them understand that God was real and active in their lives too. Her friends from before the incident noticed the change. Some thought she'd become weird or too religious, but others were drawn to her, wanted to know what had happened to make her so different, so certain, so passionate. When Maya was 17, she went back to the same camp, this time as a junior counselor, and she took the current group of campers to the spot on the river where it had happened. She showed them where she'd gone in, where the current had taken her, where she'd been pushed to shore, and she told them the whole story. One girl, about 13 years old, started crying and said, "I've been thinking about killing myself, I've been planning it, but if God can push you out of a river, maybe He can help me too." Maya sat with her for 2 hours that day, prayed with her, connected her with the camp counselor and eventually with a therapist, and that girl later wrote Maya a letter saying, "You saved my life by telling me how God saved yours." Maya is 19 now, in college, studying to be a youth pastor, and she still tells the story, has probably told it hundreds of times to thousands of people. She keeps a photo on her phone of the river, of the exact spot where it happened. And sometimes, when she's stressed or doubting or struggling, she looks at that photo and remembers the feeling of those hands on her back, pushing her against impossible current. And she knows that God is real and God is with her and nothing is too hard for Him. The camp where it happened has a marker now, a small stone near the bank, with a plaque that reads, "Maya's Miracle, August 2021. When you call on Him, He answers." New campers ask about it every summer, and the counselors tell the story, and it's become part of the culture of that place, this belief that God shows up in physical, tangible ways, that He intervenes when we cry out to Him, that miracles still happen. Pastor Mike, the camp director, says he's seen a change in the camp since Maya's incident, says kids take the worship services more seriously, pray with more faith, because they've heard about what happened and they know it's not just stories, it's real. God is real and He acts. Jessica, the counselor who first reached Maya on the bank, says, "I've pulled drowning people out of water before. I know what that looks like, and what happened to Maya wasn't drowning rescue. It was something else, something beyond what I can do or what any human can do, and I thank God I got to witness it." Now, Maya's parents became active in their church. Her dad joined the men's ministry and her mom volunteers with the prayer team. And they both say that almost losing their daughter and then seeing her saved miraculously changed their entire family, brought them to faith they'd never had before. Maya's little brother, who was 10 when it happened, is now 13 and training to be a lifeguard, says he wants to save people the way his sister was saved, wants to be part of rescues, even though he knows some rescues require more than human hands. If you're listening to this story right now, and you feel like you're being dragged under by currents you can't fight, by circumstances pulling you toward destruction, by forces stronger than you that are taking you places you don't want to go, I need you to hear what Maya learned in that river. God can push you against impossible currents, can move you to safety when every physical law says you should be swept away, can put his hands on your back and carry you to shore even when you've never really believed in him before. Call out to him today, even if this is your first prayer, even if you've spent your whole life treating him as just an idea. Say, God, I'm drowning, I'm being pulled under, push me to safety, save me, show me you're real, and watch what he does. He's still in the business of pushing people to shore when they're drowning, still responding to desperate prayers, still proving that he's God and no current is stronger than his power to save. Trust him today, because he's already reaching for you, already putting his hands on your back, already ready to push you to safety if you'll just call on his name.